Beneath calm waves and glittering coastlines, moments of celebration or work can erupt into chaos when unseen predators strike with devastating speed. Blood spreads across waters, vessels shake, and survival becomes a race against nature itself. From billionaires ambushed off South Africa to orcas ramming boats in Norway, each tale grows darker. In this video, we'll uncover 6 chilling encounters that remain unforgettable. Off the southern coast of South Africa, near the small fishing town of Gansbaai in the Western Cape Province, the waters had long been known for their abundance of marine life. The area, situated roughly 170 kilometers southeast of Cape Town, had gained international notoriety as one of the world's premier great white shark habitats. The cold Atlantic currents mixed with warmer Indian Ocean waters created ideal hunting grounds for apex predators, particularly around Dyer Island and its adjacent seal colonies. Local fishermen had respected these waters for generations, understanding that the ocean belonged to creatures far more ancient and powerful than themselves. In late August 2024, 4 Russian billionaires had chartered a luxury yacht for a private celebration off the Gansbaai coastline. Dmitry Volkov, a 52-year-old oil magnate, had organized the trip alongside his business associates: Ivan Petrov, a 48-year-old real estate developer; Elena Sokolova, a 45-year-old tech entrepreneur; and Sergei Mikhailov, a 50-year-old mining executive. The group had spent the day touring the region's wineries before boarding their chartered vessel, a sleek 30-meter yacht equipped with every conceivable luxury. As evening descended, the yacht anchored roughly 400 meters from shore, positioned near a rocky outcrop that marked the edge of a known seal colony. The billionaires had consumed considerable amounts of expensive champagne and vodka throughout the evening, their inhibitions dropping as quickly as the sun below the horizon. The yacht's crew, a team of 5 South African sailors, had grown increasingly uncomfortable with their guests' reckless behavior. Around 10:30 p.m., Dmitry had begun boasting about his youth as a competitive swimmer in Moscow, claiming he could still outswim anyone on board. His companions laughed and encouraged the bravado, their judgment clouded by alcohol and ego. Dmitry had then issued a dare that would prove catastrophic. He challenged the entire group to swim near the yacht's hull, claiming it would be an unforgettable experience under the stars. Despite the crew captain's firm warnings about nighttime swimming in shark territory, the 4 billionaires insisted they knew better. They stripped down to their swimwear and, one by one, descended the yacht's ladder into the dark, cold water. The temperature shocked them initially, but adrenaline and alcohol dulled their senses to the danger lurking below. The group splashed and laughed in the water, creating vibrations and disturbances that traveled through the ocean like dinner bells. Beneath them, roughly 15 meters down, a 6-meter female great white shark had been patrolling the area. The predator had spent the day hunting seals near the colony, her senses finely tuned to the erratic movements of prey. The sudden splashing above triggered her predatory instincts. To the shark, the sounds mimicked struggling seals, an easy meal struggling at the surface. Sergei had been treading water about 3 meters from the yacht when the attack began. The great white surged upward with terrifying speed, its massive body cutting through the water like a torpedo. The shark rammed Sergei's left leg with its snout, a behavior scientists called an investigatory bump. Before Sergei could process what was happening, the predator's jaws opened wide and clamped onto his right forearm with crushing force. Sergei released a guttural scream that pierced the night air, his voice carrying across the water in pure terror. The shark shook its head violently, attempting to drag Sergei deeper. Elena and Ivan, who had been swimming nearby, turned toward the commotion and immediately understood the horror unfolding before them. Elena began screaming for help while Ivan instinctively swam toward Sergei, his survival instincts overridden by shock and confusion. Dmitry, positioned closest to the yacht's ladder, attempted to climb back aboard but slipped on the wet rungs. In those precious seconds of chaos, the great white released Sergei's mangled arm and pivoted with surprising agility for such a massive creature. The shark's tail whipped through the water, creating a powerful surge that pushed all 4 swimmers in different directions. As Dmitry struggled to regain his grip on the ladder, the predator's dorsal fin sliced past him, its rough skin grazing his left thigh and tearing through flesh like sandpaper. Dmitry howled in pain but managed to grab the ladder's lowest rung with his good hand. The yacht's crew had already sprung into action, throwing ropes, life rings, and extending long poles into the water. Ivan reached Sergei first, grabbing his colleague under the arms and attempting to drag him toward the yacht. Blood poured from Sergei's arm, turning the surrounding water dark even in the minimal moonlight. Elena swam frantically toward the yacht, her earlier confidence replaced by primal fear. The Great White circled below, confused by the chaos but still investigating the potential meal. The crew managed to throw a rope around Elena first, hauling her aboard with desperate strength. She collapsed on the deck, hyperventilating and sobbing uncontrollably. Two crew members extended a long boat hook toward Ivan and Sergei, who were still roughly 4 meters from safety. Ivan hooked his arm through the pole while maintaining his grip on the semi-conscious Sergei. The crew pulled with all their strength, dragging both men through the bloodied water. Dmitri, meanwhile, had managed to climb 3 rungs up the ladder, his injured thigh leaving streaks of blood on the yacht's white hull. A crew member grabbed his wrist and yanked him aboard with adrenaline-fueled force. The Great White made one final approach, its massive head breaking the surface near Ivan and Sergei. The predator's black eye rolled back white as its jaws opened, revealing rows of serrated teeth. A crew member struck the water near the shark's snout with a metal pole. The sharp sound and vibration startled the creature. The Great White veered away, disappearing into the depths as suddenly as it had appeared. The entire incident lasted approximately 4 minutes. The crew hauled Ivan and Sergei aboard seconds later, immediately applying pressure to Sergei's catastrophic injuries. The yacht's captain radioed for emergency helicopter evacuation, while crew members worked to stabilize the injured. Sergei's right forearm had been shredded beyond recognition, muscle and bone visible through the torn flesh. Dmitri's thigh wound, while less severe, had severed several blood vessels and required immediate tourniquet application. Ivan had sustained deep lacerations on his shoulders and back from the shark's rough skin during the rescue. Elena, though physically unharmed, had gone into shock and required sedation. A South African emergency helicopter arrived 37 minutes later, its spotlight illuminating the blood-soaked deck. Medics rappelled down and began advanced trauma care before airlifting all 4 victims to a Cape Town hospital. Sergei underwent emergency surgery that lasted 9 hours, during which surgeons were forced to amputate his forearm just below the elbow due to irreparable tissue damage. Dmitri required extensive reconstructive surgery on his thigh, with doctors warning he would likely experience permanent nerve damage and limited mobility. Ivan's lacerations required over 200 stitches and months of physical therapy. Marine biologists later examined the incident, noting that every condition had aligned for disaster. The nighttime swim had eliminated visual predator detection, the alcohol had impaired judgment and reaction time, and the proximity to an active seal colony had placed the swimmers directly in the Great White's natural hunting corridor. The experts emphasized that the shark had behaved exactly as evolution had programmed it to behave, investigating unusual surface activity in its territory. The billionaires had survived only through the crew's rapid response and the shark's ultimate disinterest after the initial investigatory strikes. The 4 Russians never returned to South Africa. The island of Maui, located in the Central Pacific as part of the Hawaiian archipelago, had long been celebrated for its pristine beaches and world-class surfing conditions. The western coastline, stretching from Lahaina to Kaanapali, attracted thousands of water sports enthusiasts annually. The warm tropical waters, maintained at roughly 26 degrees Celsius year-round, hosted an impressive diversity of marine life. However, these same conditions also attracted tiger sharks, apex predators known for their curiosity and opportunistic feeding behavior. Local authorities had documented an increase in tiger shark activity near shallow reefs, where the predators hunted sea turtles and smaller fish species. In early March 2025, 29-year-old Chloe Westbrook had traveled to Maui from Portland, Oregon, seeking adventure and a break from her corporate marketing career. Chloe had been stand-up paddleboarding for 3 years and considered herself an intermediate-level athlete. She had spent her first 2 days on the island taking guided tours and staying close to populated beaches. However, by her 3rd morning, Chloe had grown bored with the crowded conditions and decided to venture toward a more isolated reef system roughly 800 meters north of her resort. The morning had started promisingly, with clear skies and gentle waves, Chloe had noticed warning signs posted near the beach access point, indicating recent tiger shark sightings within the past 72 hours. A lifeguard stationed nearby had specifically advised tourists to remain close to shore and avoid the reef area entirely. Chloe had nodded politely but dismissed the warnings as overly cautious. She had reasoned that thousands of people paddleboarded in Hawaii without incident, and she refused to let fear dictate her vacation experience. Chloe paddled steadily toward the reef, her board cutting through the calm surface. The water beneath her shifted from sandy bottom visibility to the darker blue of deeper channels. She had been testing her balance, attempting to execute a challenging pivot maneuver she had seen on social media videos. Chloe laughed to herself as she wobbled, regained her footing, and tried again. She had been completely absorbed in her practice, unaware of the shadow tracking her movements from below. The tiger shark, measuring approximately 4.2 meters in length, had been hunting along the reef's edge throughout the early morning. The predator had already investigated several sea turtles but found them unappetizing after initial test bites. When the shark detected the vibrations from Chloe's paddleboard overhead, its curiosity piqued. The irregular movements and splashing mimicked struggling prey, triggering the predator's investigatory instincts. The attack happened with shocking speed. The tiger shark surged upward from roughly 8 meters below, its powerful tail propelling its substantial mass toward the surface. Chloe felt a massive impact beneath her board, which launched her sideways into the water. Before she could orient herself, the shark's jaws clamped onto her right thigh with crushing pressure. Chloe screamed, a sound that carried across the water toward a group of surfers positioned about 50 meters away. The tiger shark twisted violently, its serrated teeth tearing through muscle and tissue. Chloe instinctively punched and clawed at the predator's head, but her strikes had no effect against its thick, rough skin. Blood clouded the water around her, turning the clear blue ocean into a murky red haze. The shark maintained its grip for roughly 5 seconds before releasing and circling back for another pass. A surfer named Marcus Chen had heard Chloe's screams and immediately paddled toward her position. Marcus spotted the distinctive tiger shark pattern and recognized the severity of the situation. As the predator approached for a second strike, Marcus positioned his surfboard between Chloe and the shark. When the tiger shark's snout emerged from the water, Marcus brought his board down with full force, striking the predator directly on its sensitive nose. The shark recoiled, momentarily stunned by the unexpected impact. Marcus grabbed Chloe under her arms and began dragging her toward his board. 2 other surfers had joined the rescue effort, creating a protective circle around the injured woman. The tiger shark circled at a distance, its curiosity apparently satisfied by the initial bite. A nearby tour boat had witnessed the attack and rapidly approached the scene, crew members throwing life preservers and extending rescue poles. Chloe was pulled aboard the vessel within 3 minutes of the initial strike. Her right thigh had sustained devastating damage, with deep lacerations exposing muscle and severing several blood vessels. The boat's crew applied a tourniquet above the wound as they raced back to shore at full speed. An ambulance met them at the dock, and Chloe was rushed to a trauma center. Emergency surgeons worked for 7 hours to repair the damage, saving her leg but warning that nerve damage would require extensive physical therapy and possibly permanent mobility limitations. Marine biologists who reviewed the incident emphasized several critical factors. Chloe had ignored posted warnings and ventured into known predator territory during peak tiger shark hunting hours. Her isolated position, far from other swimmers, had made her an easy target for investigation. The experts noted that tiger sharks were particularly aggressive near reef systems, where they regularly patrolled for prey. The incident served as a stark reminder that momentary overconfidence and thrill-seeking behavior could provoke rapid, violent responses from apex predators operating in their natural hunting grounds. The Gulf of Mexico, spanning roughly 1.6 million square kilometers between the United States, Mexico, and Cuba, has served as a vital hub for offshore oil extraction since the mid-20th century. The western region, approximately 150 kilometers off the Louisiana coast, contained dozens of active drilling platforms operated by various petroleum companies. These massive steel structures rose from the ocean floor, creating artificial reefs that attracted a diverse marine life. The warm Gulf waters, maintained between 24 and 29 degrees Celsius depending on season, provided ideal habitat for numerous shark species, including the notoriously aggressive bull shark. These predators thrived near offshore structures, using the shadows and currents around rig supports as ambush points for hunting. In June 2020, a 5-man maintenance crew had been assigned routine inspection and cleaning duties on Platform Delta 7, a mid-sized drilling rig operated by a Houston-based energy corporation. The crew included 32-year-old Carlos Mendes, a Brazilian immigrant who had worked offshore for 8 years, along with 4 American colleagues, ranging in age from 28 to 45 years old. Their task involved descending to the rig's lower maintenance level, positioned roughly 2 meters above the waterline, to inspect corroded support structures and clean accumulated debris from equipment housings. The morning had progressed normally, with clear skies and moderate waves. Carlos and his team had lowered themselves onto the narrow metal platform that encircled the rig's base supports. They wore standard safety harnesses attached to overhead cables, though the equipment focused primarily on preventing falls rather than marine threats. The crew had spread out along the platform's perimeter, each man responsible for a specific section of equipment. Carlos had positioned himself near the southwestern corner, where several hydraulic hoses required securing and cleaning. The work demanded that Carlos lean over the platform's edge, extending his upper body toward the waterline to reach corroded clamps and tangled cables. He had been focused entirely on his task, unaware of movement in the shadowy water beneath the rig. The platform's underside created a dark refuge from the intense Gulf sunlight, attracting smaller fish species that sought cooler temperatures. These fish, in turn, attracted larger predators that had learned to patrol the area for easy meals. The bull shark, measuring approximately 3.8 meters in length and weighing an estimated 230 kilograms, had been hunting near Platform Delta 7 since dawn. Bull sharks possessed unique physiological adaptations that allowed them to thrive in both saltwater and brackish conditions, making them particularly common around coastal oil infrastructure. This particular specimen had become territorial around the rig, aggressively defending its hunting grounds from other predators. The shark had detected vibrations from the maintenance crew's work through its highly sensitive lateral line system. Carlos had extended his right arm deep into the water to grab a floating rope end when the attack occurred. The bull shark surged upward with explosive force, its jaws opening to reveal rows of thick triangular teeth designed for crushing rather than slicing. The predator's mouth clamped onto Carlos's forearm just below the elbow, its bite force exceeding 500 kilograms per square centimeter. Carlos released an agonized scream that echoed across the platform and up to the rig's main deck. The shark's initial bite crushed through muscle and scraped against bone, but the predator's momentum carried it partially out of the water. Carlos felt himself being pulled downward toward the ocean surface, his safety harness straining against the unexpected weight. The bull shark shook its head violently from side to side, a behavior intended to tear flesh from larger prey. Blood poured from Carlos's arm, running down his elbow and dripping into the churning water below. 2 crew members working nearby, James Patterson and Miguel Rodriguez, witnessed the attack and immediately abandoned their tools. James grabbed a heavy pipe wrench while Miguel seized a metal pry bar. Both men rushed toward Carlos's position. The bull shark maintained its grip, its eyes rolling back white as it attempted to drag Carlos completely off the platform. Carlos's safety harness held firm, creating a horrific tug-of-war between human engineering and primal predatory strength. James reached Carlos first and struck the shark's snout with the pipe wrench, the metal tool connecting with a dull thud. The impact startled the predator, but failed to break its grip. Miguel positioned himself beside Carlos and thrust the pry bar toward the shark's gills, one of the few vulnerable points on the armored predator. The metal bar scraped against the shark's rough skin before finding purchase near the gill slits. Miguel pushed with desperate force, and the combination of strikes finally convinced the bull shark to release its hold. The predator dropped back into the water with a massive splash, disappearing beneath the rig's shadow. Carlos collapsed backward onto the platform, his mangled forearm pumping blood at an alarming rate. The remaining 2 crew members, who had been working on the opposite side of the rig, arrived with the platform's emergency medical kit. They immediately applied a tourniquet above Carlos's elbow while radioing for helicopter evacuation. The bull shark's attack had lasted approximately 25 seconds, from the initial bite to the release, but the damage was catastrophic. Carlos's forearm showed deep lacerations extending from wrist to elbow, with exposed tendons and fractured bone visible through the torn flesh. During the chaotic rescue, the shark had made 2 additional exploratory approaches toward the platform, its snout breaking the surface near where blood had dripped into the water. James and Miguel stood guard with their improvised weapons, striking the water's surface whenever the predator appeared. A Coast Guard helicopter arrived 28 minutes after the initial distress call, its paramedics rappelling down to the maintenance platform. They stabilized Carlos with advanced trauma procedures before airlifting him to a hospital in New Orleans. Emergency surgeons worked through the afternoon, repairing severed blood vessels and reconstructing damaged muscle tissue. Carlos retained his arm but faced months of physical therapy to regain even limited functionality. 2 other crew members required treatment for minor lacerations sustained during the frantic rescue attempt, though their injuries paled compared to Carlos's trauma. Marine biologists who investigated the incident emphasized that bull sharks represented one of the most dangerous species to humans due to their territorial aggression and proximity to coastal infrastructure. The experts explained that the rig structure created an artificial ecosystem that concentrated prey species, which in turn attracted and habituated predators. Workers entering the shark's established territory, particularly when leaning into the water, essentially invaded the predator's hunting zone. The attack left the entire maintenance crew permanently shaken. Their casual attitude toward ocean proximity was replaced by a visceral understanding of the dangers lurking in the shadowed waters beneath every offshore platform. The coastal waters surrounding Gansbaai, a small fishing village in South Africa's Western Cape province, had earned the ominous nickname Great White Shark Capital of the World through decades of documented predator activity. Located roughly 170 kilometers southeast of Cape Town, the region's unique oceanography created perfect hunting conditions for apex predators. In September 2017, Mark Jensen and his wife Claire had traveled from their home in Melbourne, Australia, to experience South Africa's renowned coastal beauty. Mark, a 38-year-old investment banker, had chartered a private luxury yacht for their 10th wedding anniversary. Claire, 36, had expressed reservations about the trip from the beginning, uncomfortable with Mark's growing obsession with extreme experiences. The couple had spent 3 days touring Cape Town before sailing toward Gansbaai, where Mark insisted they anchor near the seal colony for what he called an authentic African adventure. The yacht, a 12-meter vessel crewed by 3 local sailors, arrived at the anchorage point around 2 p.m. under clear skies and moderate winds. Captain Piet Kruger, a 52-year-old lifelong Gansbaai resident, had immediately advised against any water activities near the seal colony. He explained that great white sharks patrolled these waters constantly, particularly during afternoon hours when seals returned from hunting expeditions. Mark had dismissed the warnings with characteristic arrogance, insisting that sharks only attacked surfers and that clear water would allow him to see any approaching predators. Claire had begged her husband to reconsider, her anxiety increasing as she watched seals leaping through the water roughly 80 meters from their anchorage. Mark accused her of being paranoid and overcautious, claiming she always ruined their adventures with unnecessary fear. He stripped to his swimming trunks and positioned himself at the yacht's stern, preparing to dive despite the crew's visible discomfort. Captain Kruger made one final attempt to prevent the swim, explaining that even experienced locals avoided these waters entirely. Mark ignored him and jumped feet first into the waist-deep water near the yacht's hull. The water temperature shocked Mark initially, as the cold Atlantic currents dropped the surface temperature to approximately 14 degrees Celsius. He gasped and laughed, treading water while calling up to Claire to join him. She remained frozen at the yacht's railing, her hands gripping the metal barrier until her knuckles turned white. Mark began swimming away from the yacht, demonstrating his crawl stroke and occasionally diving beneath the surface to prove his comfort in the ocean environment. Beneath the yacht, approximately 20 meters down, a massive female great white shark had been tracking a young seal. The predator measured roughly 5.8 meters in length and weighed an estimated 1,800 kilograms. She had hunted these waters for over 2 decades, her scarred body testament to countless successful kills. When Mark entered the water, His splashing and erratic movements created vibrations that mimicked a struggling seal, the shark's primary prey species. The predator abandoned her current target and adjusted her trajectory toward this new disturbance. Great white sharks typically attacked from below, using the sun's position and water clarity to mask their approach until the final seconds. This particular predator had refined her technique through thousands of hunts, approaching with mechanical precision. Mark had swum roughly 15 meters from the yacht when the attack began. The great white surged upward at an estimated 40 kilometers per hour, her massive body cutting through the water like a guided missile. Claire saw the shadow first, a dark torpedo shape materializing from the depths directly beneath her husband. She opened her mouth to scream a warning, but the attack happened faster than human perception could process. The great white's jaws opened wide, revealing rows of serrated teeth, and clamped onto Mark's left leg and lower torso. The impact lifted Mark partially out of the water, his body rising 2 meters before crashing back down in an explosion of white foam and red blood. Mark's scream cut off instantly as the shark dragged him underwater. Claire's shriek pierced across the ocean, a sound of pure horror that would haunt the crew for years. Captain Kruger grabbed a boat hook while his 2 crew members scrambled for ropes and life preservers. The water around the yacht transformed into a churning red mass as the great white shook her head violently beneath the surface. Mark's body appeared briefly, his face contorted in agony before disappearing again as the shark pulled him deeper. The predator's attack followed instinctive behavior patterns that had been refined over millions of years of evolution. After the initial bite, great white sharks typically release prey to let it weaken from blood loss before returning to feed. However, this particular shark maintained her grip, her teeth having penetrated deep into Mark's femoral artery and lower abdomen. The crew threw ropes toward the area where Mark had disappeared, but the thrashing had moved too far from the yacht's reach. Approximately 30 seconds after the initial strike, Mark's body surfaced one final time, floating face down 8 meters from the yacht. The great white had released him, circling below to assess the situation. Captain Kruger extended the boat hook toward Mark's floating form, while one crew member prepared to jump in with a safety line. Before anyone could act, the shark returned for a second strike. The predator's head broke the surface, jaws opening impossibly wide, and clamped onto Mark's torso. This bite was final and catastrophic, the shark's teeth crushing through ribs and vital organs. Claire collapsed on the deck, her screams dissolving into incoherent sobbing. The great white dragged Mark's body underwater and disappeared into the depths of Shark Alley. The entire attack had lasted approximately 90 seconds from initial contact to final disappearance. Blood continued spreading across the water's surface, creating an oil slick pattern that stretched 20 meters in every direction. Captain Kruger immediately radioed South African maritime authorities, his voice shaking as he reported the fatality. The crew pulled Claire away from the railing as she attempted to throw herself overboard, her mind broken by the horror she had witnessed. 2 nearby shark cage diving boats arrived within 10 minutes, their crews searching the area for any sign of Mark's remains. They found nothing except shredded fabric from his swimming trunks floating near where he had disappeared. The great white shark had vanished into deeper water, likely consuming her prey in the murky depths below the seal colony. Authorities recovered Mark's body 3 days later when it washed ashore roughly 12 kilometers south of Gansby. The remains were barely recognizable, requiring dental records for identification. Claire was sedated and airlifted to a Cape Town psychiatric facility, where she remained under observation for 2 weeks. She could not speak coherently about the attack for months afterward, the trauma manifesting in severe PTSD and recurring nightmares. Marine biologists who examined the incident emphasized that Mark had created perfect conditions for a fatal attack. The afternoon timing coincided with peak great white feeding activity. His position near an active seal colony placed him directly in the predator's hunting corridor, and his swimming behavior mimicked wounded prey. The experts noted that great white sharks could not distinguish between humans and seals from below, relying instead on silhouette and movement patterns. Even experienced swimmers with perfect ocean awareness remained vulnerable in these waters, where apex predators transformed ordinary recreation into instantaneous tragedy within seconds. The Setu wetlands, located in the northeastern state of Terengganu along Malaysia's east coast, comprise an intricate network of rivers, lagoons, and lakes, stretching across roughly 23,000 hectares. Lake Kampung Jelapang, a brackish water body situated approximately 8 kilometers inland from the South China Sea, serves as a vital fishing ground for local communities. In April 2022, Arif Rahman, a 50-year-old fisherman from Kampung Jelapang village, had been casting nets in the lake since before sunrise. Arif had fished these waters for 32 years, following in his father's and grandfather's footsteps. That particular morning, Arif had positioned his small wooden fishing boat roughly 40 meters from the lake's western shore, where submerged vegetation attracted schools of tilapia and catfish. The morning mist hung thick over the water's surface, reducing visibility to less than 10 meters. This atmospheric condition occurred frequently during the transition between dry and wet seasons. Arif had grown accustomed to these conditions, relying more on experience and intuition than visual confirmation when setting his nets. He had successfully deployed 3 nets and was working on untangling the 4th when it snagged on submerged debris. Arif leaned over his boat's starboard side, extending both arms into the murky water to locate the obstruction. The water temperature felt pleasantly warm, approximately 28 degrees Celsius. He had been focused entirely on freeing the tangled nylon mesh, his fingers working methodically to separate the net from what felt like a submerged branch. The saltwater crocodile, measuring over 4 meters in length and weighing approximately 400 kilograms, had been lying motionless in the shallows, roughly 6 meters from Arif's boat. The reptile had detected vibrations from the boat's arrival through sensory organs in its jaw, but remained patient, conserving energy while assessing the situation. When Arif leaned over the boat's edge, extending his arms deep into the water, the crocodile's predatory instincts triggered. It launched itself through the water with shocking acceleration, its powerful tail propelling its massive body forward. The attack happened with no warning. The crocodile's jaws, capable of exerting over 1,600 kilograms of bite force, clamped onto Arif's right forearm with crushing pressure. Arif screamed, a primal sound that echoed across the misty lake. The crocodile immediately began executing its signature death roll, a spinning maneuver designed to disorient prey and tear flesh from bone. Arif felt himself being pulled toward the water as the reptile twisted violently. The crocodile's serrated teeth punctured through Arif's skin and muscle. The death roll created centrifugal force that whipped Arif's body partially off the boat, his lower torso slamming against the wooden hull. Pain overwhelmed his senses as the crocodile completed 2 full rotations in less than 3 seconds. The reptile's tail thrashed against the water's surface, creating massive splashes that rocked the small fishing boat dangerously. Arif's survival instincts overrode the pain. He grabbed the tangled fishing net with his free left hand and threw it over the crocodile's head, the nylon mesh momentarily covering the reptile's eyes and nostrils. The crocodile paused its death roll, confused by the sudden restriction of its sensory organs. Arif used this opportunity to kick violently at the crocodile's snout with his right leg, his heel connecting with the reptile's sensitive nostril area. The combination of the net and kicks caused the crocodile to loosen its grip momentarily. Arif pulled with desperate strength, feeling his forearm tearing against the crocodile's teeth as he extracted it from the predator's jaws. Blood poured from multiple puncture wounds and deep lacerations extending from his wrist to his elbow. The crocodile shook its head to remove the net, easily dislodging the lightweight mesh. Arif threw himself backward into the boat's center, his right arm hanging uselessly and bleeding profusely. The crocodile's head broke the water's surface again, its cold reptilian eyes fixed on the boat. The predator bumped against the wooden hull, testing whether it could overturn the vessel. Arif grabbed his fishing paddle with his functioning left hand and struck at the crocodile's snout each time it approached. The persistent strikes convinced the crocodile that this prey would require too much energy to secure. Arif's screams had carried across the misty lake, reaching 3 other fishermen working roughly 100 meters away. They immediately began paddling toward the sound, shouting to let Arif know assistance was approaching. The noise from multiple boats apparently discouraged the crocodile, which submerged and disappeared into the murky depths. Arif collapsed in his boat, using his left hand to apply pressure to his mangled right forearm. The rescue boats arrived within 4 minutes of the attack. The fishermen, including Arif's younger brother Hassan and two cousins, found him conscious but going into shock from blood loss. They immediately fashioned a tourniquet from fishing line and cloth, tightening it above Arif's elbow to slow the hemorrhaging. They escorted the boats back to shore, constantly scanning the water for the crocodile's return. Village residents met them at the dock. An ambulance arrived 20 minutes later from the district hospital in Kuala Terengganu. Paramedics found Arif's right forearm with multiple deep puncture wounds, several lacerations extending to the bone, and 2 fingers on his left hand also injured from his frantic struggle. He had lost significant blood but remained conscious. Emergency room doctors worked for 6 hours to clean and repair the damage. The crocodile's teeth had fractured bones in Arif's forearm and severed multiple tendons. Surgeons managed to save his arm and most of his hand function, though he would require extensive physical therapy and faced permanent scarring and reduced grip strength. Medical staff praised his quick thinking with the fishing net and his physical strength in breaking free from the death roll, actions that almost certainly saved his life. Wildlife officials who investigated emphasized that saltwater crocodiles remained opportunistic ambush predators that struck anything entering their territory. The morning mist had prevented visual detection of the reptile, and Arif's extended position over the water had presented an irresistible target. Experts noted that even experienced locals who understood crocodile behavior remained vulnerable to attacks, as the reptile's patience and explosive striking speed gave prey virtually no warning. The incident reminded the entire fishing community that apex predators shared their waters, and momentary inattention in crocodile habitat could result in catastrophic consequences within seconds. The waters surrounding Norway's southern coastline, particularly near the Skagerrak Strait, have long been recognized as vital corridors for marine mammal migration. The region's deep fjords and nutrient-rich currents have attracted numerous cetacean species, including pods of orcas that hunt herring and mackerel during seasonal migrations. Marine biologists had begun documenting unusual behavioral changes in certain orca populations, particularly among younger individuals that appeared increasingly curious about boats and human presence. The coastal towns near Mandal, situated approximately 320 kilometers southwest of Oslo, have witnessed a growing number of incidents where orcas approach vessels with investigative intent. In July 2019, a small tour boat operated by a local fishing family departed from Mandal Harbor, carrying 12 passengers for a morning wildlife observation excursion. Among the passengers was 10-year-old Lucas Bergstrom, traveling with his parents from Stockholm, Sweden. Lucas had begged his parents for months to take him whale watching, his fascination with marine mammals bordering on obsession. The morning began with perfect conditions: clear skies, calm seas, and excellent visibility. Captain Torbjørn Haugen, a 58-year-old veteran of these waters, steered the boat toward an area where porpoises frequently surfaced. Lucas positioned himself near the stern's portside railing, leaning over to watch the boat's wake. Around 9:30 a.m., approximately 6 kilometers from shore, several passengers noticed dark shapes moving beneath the hull. Captain Haugen identified them as orcas, a pod of roughly 7 individuals. He reduced the engine to idle speed following standard protocol. The orcas had been hunting mackerel, their coordinated movements creating underwater corralling patterns that trapped schools of fish. The passengers erupted in excitement, crowding the railings to take photographs of the magnificent predators. The orcas appeared to be investigating the vessel with curiosity, their echolocation clicks audible as metallic pinging sounds. Lucas gripped the railing tightly, thrilled beyond measure. 3 younger orcas, each measuring between 5 and 6 meters, suddenly began exhibiting ramming behavior. The first impact struck the stern with tremendous force, producing a loud metallic boom. The boat lurched violently forward, throwing passengers off balance. Lucas, who had been leaning far over the railing, pitched forward and tumbled into the frigid North Sea. The water temperature measured approximately 16 degrees Celsius. Lucas plunged beneath the surface, his life jacket bringing him back up within seconds. He emerged sputtering and disoriented. Screams erupted from the boat as passengers witnessed the child's fall. Lucas's mother, Ingrid, released a piercing shriek and attempted to climb over the railing before being restrained. The orcas immediately changed behavior upon detecting Lucas in the water. Two younger whales approached rapidly, their massive bodies creating bow waves that pushed Lucas away from the boat. Captain Haugen threw the engine into reverse, but the orca's presence made navigation extremely dangerous. The predators circled Lucas at roughly 3 to 4 meters, their echolocation clicks intensifying. A second ramming impact struck the port side from a larger adult orca measuring approximately 7 meters. The collision tilted the vessel sharply, causing passengers to fall onto the deck. Captain Haugen fought to maintain control while his first mate, Bjorn Christiansen, grabbed life rings and ropes. Lucas treaded water desperately, his life jacket keeping him afloat but doing nothing to combat the cold or terror. The orcas continued circling, occasionally breaking the surface with explosive huffing sounds. One juvenile passed within 2 meters, its massive body creating a surge that pushed the boy underwater briefly. Before Bjorn could jump overboard, another fishing vessel that had been working roughly 200 meters away arrived at full speed. The second boat approached from the opposite side, creating a barrier between Lucas and the circling orcas. The noise from 2 engines apparently overwhelmed the orca's curiosity. Captain Haugen maneuvered close while Bjorn threw a life ring toward Lucas. The first attempt fell short, but the second landed within reach. Lucas grabbed it with both hands, his fingers numb from cold. Bjorn and the passengers pulled the rope, dragging Lucas toward the stern platform. The orcas made one final approach, 3 individuals converging from different angles. The second boat's captain gunned his engine and positioned his vessel between the whales and the rescue, creating noise that caused the orcas to veer away. Bjorn leaned over and grabbed Lucas under his arms, hauling him aboard. The boy collapsed onto the deck, shivering violently. The entire incident from Lucas's fall to rescue lasted approximately 4 minutes. The orcas circled both boats briefly before swimming toward deeper water. Captain Haugen headed for shore at maximum speed, while passengers wrapped Lucas in blankets. His core temperature had dropped dangerously, and his lips had turned blue from hypothermia onset. An ambulance met the boat at Mandel Harbor 25 minutes later. Lucas was conscious but hypothermic, with bruising on his ribs and shoulders. He was transported to a trauma center, where doctors treated him for mild hypothermia, shock, and minor contusions. Lucas spent 2 nights under observation before being released. The psychological trauma manifested in nightmares and acute anxiety around water for months afterward. Marine biologists investigated extensively and noted that orca ramming of boats had risen sharply since 2018, especially among juveniles. Scientists suggested it might be a play or learned social behavior. While orcas rarely showed aggression toward humans, their size made even curious interactions dangerous. The incident was a stark reminder that apex predators remain wild and unpredictable, capable of turning routine excursions into life-threatening emergencies within seconds.